Before the lights go out and tonight's story begins crawling into your ears, do me a quick favor that keeps these dark tales alive. Smash that subscribe button and leave a like if the chills feel just right. It's the only way more lost souls find these midnight whispers. And drop a comment with the city or the forgotten corner of the world you're listening from right now. I love pinning them on the map, especially when the lights are off, and I know I'm not the only one still awake out there. Turn the volume up, kill the lights, and whatever you do, don't pause once we start. Let's begin. The wind carried voices across the prairie at night. Sheriff Marcus Webb had learned that in his first winter in Carver County, Wyoming. 23 years later, he still couldn't tell if they were real or just the sound of air whistling through the coulees and draws that cut through the high desert like surgical scars. Tonight, the voices were screaming. Marcus pulled his Silverado off Highway 287, gravel crunching under the tires as he came to a stop at the coordinates dispatch had given him. His headlights swept across emptiness. Sagebrush, buffalo grass, and the kind of darkness that only existed this far from civilization. The nearest town, Carver, population 847, sat 18 miles behind him. Ahead was nothing but 200 miles of wilderness stretching to the Montana border. "Unit 1, I'm on scene," Marcus said into his radio, cutting the engine. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. "Copy that, Sheriff," came the static-laced voice of Donna, working night dispatch. "Cell reception's gonna be spotty out there." The hikers who called it in said they saw lights, lots of them. Said it looked like a whole town out in the middle of nowhere. "Probably just gas flares from the drilling operations," Marcus said, though he knew there was no active drilling within 50 miles of this location. "He checked the permits himself. That's what I told them," Donna said, "but they were pretty shook up. Said the lights were moving, dancing." Marcus sighed, watching his breath fog in the cab. It was October, and the temperature had already dropped to the low 20s. "I'll take a look. Should be back in an hour." "Be careful, Marcus." He smiled at that. Donna had been working dispatch since before he was elected sheriff. She'd known his father, too, Jackson Webb, Carver County Sheriff for 32 years until a heart attack took him in 2003. She'd sent his father on 1,000 calls just like this one, probably used the same words. Marcus grabbed his mag light from the passenger seat and stepped out into the wind. It hit him like a physical force, carrying the smell of snow and something else, something organic and wrong, like meat left too long in the sun. He pulled his jacket tighter and started walking. The landscape here was deceptive. What looked flat from the road was actually a series of rolling hills and shallow valleys. 30 yards from his truck, Marcus lost sight of the highway completely. The darkness was profound, the kind that pressed against your eyes. His flashlight beam seemed to dissolve after 20 feet, swallowed by the void. He'd been walking for 10 minutes when he saw the first light. It was small, flickering, maybe a quarter mile ahead. Orange like a campfire or a candle. As he watched, another appeared beside it. Then another. Within 30 seconds, there were dozens of them, scattered across what he knew should be empty prairie. Marcus stopped walking. His hand drifted to the Glock on his hip. The lights weren't moving randomly. They were organized, arranged. They formed what looked like streets, a grid pattern that stretched for hundreds of yards. And Donna had been right. They were dancing, pulsing with an irregular rhythm that made his eyes hurt if he watched too long. He keyed his radio. "Dispatch, you there?" Static. "Donna?" More static, then fragments of words lost in white noise. Marcus checked his phone. No signal. Not unusual out here, but the timing made his skin crawl. He should go back to the truck. Call it in from closer to the highway. That's what protocol said. That's what his training said. That's what the voice in his head that sounded a lot like his father said. But Marcus had been sheriff for 18 years. He'd seen meth labs and murder-suicides, drunk drivers wrapped around fence posts, and a man who tried to fight a buffalo and lost. He'd found missing hikers and brought them home. He'd pulled teenagers from crashed cars and told parents their children weren't coming home. This was his county. These were his people, even if they were just lost hikers or kids from Casper having a party where they shouldn't. He kept walking. The smell got worse as he approached, that same wrong meat odor, mixed now with something sweet and cloying like overripe fruit. The lights became clearer. They weren't campfires. They were too uniform, too bright. They looked almost like old-fashioned gas lamps, the kind you'd see in historical photos of frontier towns. That's when Marcus saw the buildings. They materialized out of the darkness like ships emerging from fog. Wooden structures, maybe 20 or 30 of them, arranged along dirt streets in a perfect grid. They looked old, frontier old. False-fronted shops with hitching posts, a saloon with batwing doors, a general store, a church with a white steeple that seemed to glow against the black sky. It was impossible. Marcus had lived in Carver County his entire life. He knew every structure, every ranch, every abandoned homestead. There was nothing out here. Nothing had ever been out here. The land was too remote, too harsh. Even the native tribes had mostly used it as hunting grounds, not permanent settlements. And yet here it stood, solid and real, smoke rising from chimneys, lights burning in windows. Marcus moved closer, his boots making no sound on the packed earth of the street. That was wrong too. The ground should be soft, covered in grass and sage. This was hard-packed dirt, worn smooth by years of traffic. He approached the nearest building, the general store. A sign above the door read, "Patience Mercantile" in faded gold letters. Through the window, he could see shelves stocked with goods, jars and cans, bolts of fabric, tools hanging from hooks. Everything looked old but well maintained, like a museum display. The door was unlocked. Marcus pushed it open slowly, his hand on his weapon. A bell jingled above his head, a cheerful sound that made the silence afterward feel even heavier. Inside, the smell was stronger, dust and old wood, and that sweet rot odor underneath everything. "Hello?" His voice sounded flat, absorbed by the space. "Carver County Sheriff's Department. Anyone here?" No answer. He moved through the store, his flashlight sweeping over merchandise that looked like it belonged in the 1880s. Everything was pristine, untouched by weather or time. Price tags hung from items written in elaborate script. Flour, 5 cents. Bacon, 15 cents. Laudanum, 25 cents. On the counter he found a ledger. The pages were filled with entries in that same careful handwriting, recording purchases and debts. The dates ranged through 1889. The last entry was dated October 17th. John Mercer, 1 shovel, 1 pickaxe, 1 lantern, paid in full. October 17th, 1889. Exactly 136 years ago today. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He backed toward the door, suddenly desperate to be outside, to breathe air that didn't taste like decay and flowers. He stumbled into the street and nearly collided with someone. His hand went to his gun, but he froze when he saw her. She was a woman, maybe 30, wearing a long dress that belonged in a period drama. Her face was pale, her eyes dark and deep. She didn't look surprised to see him. She looked sad. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. "Not yet. Not for a long time yet. Ma'am, I'm Sheriff Webb. I need you to—" "We know who you are, Marcus." She smiled, and it was the saddest thing he'd ever seen. "Your family has always known how to find us. Your great-great-grandfather helped build this place. Before what?" She gestured around them, at the impossible town glowing in the darkness. Before we learned the price. Before the long dark came and took its due. Before patience became what it is now. Marcus's mouth was dry. This isn't real. This can't be real. It's as real as anything. The woman took a step closer. This is Patience, Sheriff. Founded in 1887 by 43 souls looking for a new life. They found gold in the hills, brought in more people, built a proper town. For 2 years, they thrived. Then October 17, 1889 came, and the long dark arrived. What's the long dark? Hunger, she said simply. Old hunger, older than these plains, older than the mountains. It lives in the spaces between. It was sleeping, and we woke it. 43 people screamed that night. By morning, Patience was gone. Not destroyed, gone, removed from the world. Marcus wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at him to get back to his truck and drive until this nightmare was in his rearview mirror. But his feet wouldn't move. Why are you telling me this? Because you're here. Because your blood called to this place, just like your ancestors did. Because the long dark is hungry again, Marcus, and it's going to wake soon. When it does, she looked past him toward the church. When it does, patience will appear in the world again for one night. And it will need to feed. This is insane. Yes, she agreed, but you'll remember. You'll remember us. And when the long dark wakes, you'll know what you have to do. The lights began to dim, all at once, as if someone was turning down a collective switch. The woman was already fading, becoming translucent. Wait, Marcus reached for her, but his hand passed through air. What do I have to do? Her voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Keep them away, Marcus. When patience appears, keep everyone away. Don't let anyone enter. The long dark only needs 43. If it gets more, she was gone. The lights were gone. The buildings were gone. Marcus stood in empty prairie, his flashlight illuminating nothing but sagebrush and grass. The smell was gone too, replaced by clean wind and coming snow. His radio crackled to life. Sheriff Webb? Marcus, you there? I lost you for a minute. He keyed the mic with shaking hands. I'm here, Donna. I didn't find anything. Must have been atmospheric lights or something. I'm heading back. The walk to his truck felt like it took hours. When he finally reached it and climbed inside, Marcus sat for a long time, engine running, heater blasting, trying to convince himself it had been a hallucination. Exhaustion, stress, maybe carbon monoxide from a bad catalytic converter. But when he looked at his boots, they were covered in dust, fine, pale dust that looked like it had come from a 100-year-old floor. And in his pocket, he found something that made his blood freeze. A price tag, written in elaborate script. Marcus Webb, 1 warning, payment due. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table in the house he'd inherited from his father. The price tag laid out in front of him like evidence from a crime scene he couldn't solve. Outside, the first snow of the season had started to fall, fat flakes drifting past the windows in the pre-dawn darkness. He tried to research patience. His father's old desktop computer was slow, the internet connection even slower, but he searched until his eyes burned. There was nothing. No town called Patience in Carver County. No mining claims registered in that area. No census records, no newspaper articles, no historical society mentions. It was as if the place had never existed. But the price tag was real, the dust on his boots was real, and the woman's words echoed in his head. Your great-great-grandfather helped build this place. At 6 a.m., Marcus gave up on sleep and drove to the Carver County Historical Society, a converted Victorian house on Main Street run by Eleanor Ashford, a retired school teacher who knew more about local history than anyone alive. He waited in his truck until he saw lights come on inside at 8:30, then walked up the snow-dusted path and knocked. Eleanor opened the door, wearing a thick cardigan and reading glasses on a chain. "Marcus Webb, you look like hell. Come in before you freeze." The interior smelled like old paper and coffee. Eleanor's cat, Chairman Mao, watched him from atop a filing cabinet with luminous yellow eyes. Marcus followed Eleanor into what had once been a parlor, now lined with shelves and filing cabinets containing the documented history of Carver County. "Coffee?" Eleanor asked, pouring herself a cup from a pot that looked older than Marcus. "Please." He accepted the chipped mug gratefully. "Eleanor, I need to ask you about something that might sound strange." "Sheriff, I'm 73 years old, and I've lived in Carver my entire life." Strange is relative. She settled into a worn armchair. "What's on your mind?" "Have you ever heard of a town called Patience?" Eleanor's hand froze halfway to her mouth, coffee sloshing in her cup. The expression that crossed her face was complex: surprise, recognition, and something that looked like fear. She set her cup down carefully. "Where did you hear that name?" Marcus's pulse quickened. "So it's real?" "Real is a complicated word, Marcus." Eleanor stood and moved to one of the filing cabinets, her movement slower than usual. "Your father asked me about Patience once, about 20 years ago. I told him the same thing I'm about to tell you. Some stories are better left alone." "My father knew about it?" Eleanor pulled out a slim folder, its edges yellowed with age. "Your father was a good man and a fine sheriff. But there were things in this county that troubled him, things he couldn't explain." She handed Marcus the folder. "This is everything I have. It's not much. Most of the records were lost in a fire at the old county courthouse in 1902. Some people said the fire was accidental. Others said it was necessary." Marcus opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of what looked like journal entries, written in faded ink. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, as if the writer had been desperate to get the words down. "That's from the diary of Reverend Josiah Blackwell," Eleanor said. "He was a traveling preacher who passed through this area in 1889. Found these pages tucked into a Bible at an estate sale in 1976. The family who had it didn't even know it was there." Marcus began to read. "October 15th, 1889. Arrived in the settlement of Patience this morning. A thriving community of some 43 souls built around a gold claim in the hills north of here. The mine has been hard-working and pious, though I sense a desperation beneath their Christian charity. The mine has been producing less each month, and winter approaches. October 16th, 1889. Held services in the church this evening. Good attendance, but I am troubled. Several townspeople spoke of strange occurrences, voices in the night, shadows that move against the wind, dreams of vast, hungry darkness. The mine foreman, John Mercer, approached me after the service. He said they'd broken through to a new chamber 3 weeks ago. Said the air that came out smelled like the breath of something that should never breathe. October 17th, 1889. God preserve us. I write this from 5 miles distant, my hands still shaking. At sundown, I went to the church to retrieve my Bible, forgotten after morning prayers. What I witnessed, I have no words adequate to describe it. The sky above Patience turned black, not the black of night, but something deeper, something absolute. The darkness descended like a living thing, and the screaming began. I am ashamed to admit I ran. I ran while 43 souls shrieked in agony behind me. I ran until my legs gave out, and when I turned back, Patience was gone. Not destroyed, simply absent, as if it had never been. The land where it stood was empty prairie, undisturbed. But I could still hear them screaming, faint and distant, carried on the wind. I do not know what evil was unleashed from that mine, but I know this: patience is not destroyed. It is somewhere else, somewhere wrong, and God help us all if it ever returns. The entry ended there. Marcus looked up to find Eleanor watching him with sad, knowing eyes. "Your great-great-grandfather was William Webb," she said quietly. "He was one of the founders of Patience, a carpenter, built most of the buildings himself, including that church. According to what little I've been able to piece together, he left town the morning of October 17th to buy supplies in Casper. When he came back 3 days later, there was nothing but empty land. No buildings, no people, no evidence anything had ever been there." "What happened to him?" "Went mad," Eleanor said bluntly. "Spent the rest of his life claiming he could hear his wife and children calling to him from somewhere far away." "What happened to him?" "Went mad," Eleanor said bluntly. "Spent the rest of his life claiming he could hear his wife and children calling to him from somewhere far away. Died in an asylum in Cheyenne in 1903. But before he did, he made your great-grandfather promise something, that the Webb family would watch over that land, that if Patience ever came back, they'd keep people away." Marcus felt cold despite the warmth of the house. "It came back last night, Eleanor. I was there. I saw it. I talked to someone." Eleanor closed her eyes. "Then God help us, Marcus. Because if Patience is appearing again, that means the long dark is waking." "Everyone keeps saying that. What is it?" "Something old. Something that was sleeping deep in the earth until the miners of Patience woke it up. My theory?" Eleanor moved to the window, looking out at the snowy street. "I think they found something in that mine. A cave system maybe, or a chamber that went down deeper than any mine should go. And whatever was down there, it was hungry. The woman I spoke to said it needs 43. That's how many people lived in Patience. 43 people disappeared the night of October 17th, 1889, Eleanor confirmed. 43 people who are still there in whatever place Patience was taken to. Still living in their town, still walking their streets, stuck in some kind of loop. Every 136 years, on the anniversary, Patience appears in our world for one night. And the long dark," she turned back to Marcus, "the long dark gets to feed. On what? On anyone foolish enough to enter. The 43 souls of Patience are its regular meal, consumed over and over for eternity. But if new people enter the town during its appearance," Eleanor's voice dropped, "then those people become part of the cycle. The town grows, the hunger grows, and the next time it appears, it will need more." Marcus thought of the woman's final words. The long dark only needs 43. If it gets more, how do we stop it? "We don't," Eleanor said firmly. "We do what your great-great-grandfather begged his descendants to do. We keep people away. We make sure no one enters Patience when it appears. The cycle continues, those 43 souls remain trapped, but the hunger doesn't spread." She paused. "It's a terrible bargain, Marcus. Damning 43 people to eternal torment to save everyone else. But it's the only one we have." Marcus stood, his legs unsteady. "When will it appear again? If it showed itself to you last night as just lights and buildings, then the appearance is getting stronger. My guess? It will manifest fully on October 17th, 10 days from now. And when it does, it will be solid and real for the entire night, from sundown to sunrise. Anyone who enters during those hours will be trapped when it vanishes at dawn. What do I tell people? How do I keep them away from the middle of nowhere without explaining why?" Eleanor smiled grimly. "You're the sheriff, Marcus. I'm sure you'll think of something. Your father did, back in 2003. Closed off the entire area, claimed there was a toxic spill from old mining operations. Kept everyone away for 3 days. Nobody questioned him. Nobody died. My father saw patients the night before he died. He was out there alone, doing what William Webb asked his family to do, standing guard. Eleanor's eyes were wet. The heart attack took him on October 18, 2003, the day after patients vanished again. I've always wondered if, seeing it, knowing what he was protecting people from, if the stress was what killed him. Marcus felt the weight of generations settling on his shoulders. His great-great-grandfather, driven mad by the loss of his family. His father, dying the day after standing guard against an impossible horror. Now him, handed the same terrible responsibility.
"There has to be another way," he said. "Some way to end this. To free those people. If there is, no one's found it in 136 years." Eleanor walked him to the door. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I know this isn't the answer you wanted, but sometimes being sheriff isn't about solving the problem. It's about holding the line, keeping people safe from things they don't understand and shouldn't have to." Marcus drove back to his office in a daze. The Carver County Sheriff's Department was a small brick building on the edge of town, housing his office, a bullpen for his 3 deputies, a holding cell that was rarely used, and a dispatch room where Donna ruled supreme. When he walked in, shaking snow from his jacket, all 3 deputies were there. Tom Reeves, a graying veteran who'd worked with Marcus's father, Sarah Chen, young and ambitious, 2 years out of the academy, and Billy Farrow, a local kid who knew every back road and hunting trail in the county. They all looked up when he entered, and Tom's expression immediately shifted to concern. "Boss, you look like you've seen a ghost." Close enough, Marcus thought. "Conference room. Now. All of you, including Donna." 5 minutes later, they were gathered around the scarred wooden table where Marcus had conducted 100 briefings. He looked at their faces, people he trusted, people he'd worked with for years, and made a decision. They deserved the truth, or at least as much of it as he understood. "What I'm about to tell you is going to sound insane," he began, "but I need you to listen, and I need you to trust me." He told them everything. The lights on the prairie, the impossible town, the woman who'd spoken to him, Eleanor's revelations about patience in the long dark, his family's connection to it all. When he finished, the silence in the room was profound. Sarah spoke first. "Sheriff, with all due respect, have you considered that you might have experienced some kind of hallucination? Carbon monoxide, maybe, or—" Marcus pulled the price tag from his pocket and laid it on the table. The paper was yellowed and brittle, the ink faded but clear. Tom leaned forward to examine it, his face going pale. "I've seen writing like this before," Tom said quietly, "in my grandmother's attic. She had documents from the 1880s. This is real, Marcus. This isn't something you could fake." "So what are you saying?" Billy's voice cracked slightly. He was only 24, the youngest deputy by a decade. "That there's some kind of ghost town that appears out nowhere? That eats people?" "I'm saying that something impossible is going to happen in 10 days, Marcus said. "And our job is to make sure nobody gets hurt when it does." Donna had been quiet throughout the entire story, her weathered face unreadable. Now she leaned back in her chair and sighed. "This was maybe a week before he died. We were here late, just the 2 of us, and he'd been drinking. Not much, just enough to loosen his tongue. He said, 'Donna, if anything ever happens to me, you make sure Marcus knows about the empty land north of 16 Mile Draw. You make sure he knows to keep people away from it on October 17th. I didn't understand what he meant then. I think I do now. Marcus felt a lump in his throat. His father had known, had carried this burden alone, trying to protect him from it. And in the end, it had killed him anyway. "So what's the plan?" Sarah asked. her earlier skepticism replaced by professional focus. How do we keep people away from an area that size? Marcus moved to the wall map of Carver County, studying the vast emptiness north of Highway 287. The area where patients would appear was roughly 40 square miles of open prairie and rolling hills. No fences, no barriers, just wilderness that bordered national forest on one side and private ranch land on the other. "We closed the highway," he said. "Tom, you work with the state troopers to set up roadblocks on 287, north and south." Official reason is what? Hazardous materials transport? Emergency pipeline maintenance? Unstable abandoned mine shafts, Tom suggested. "There's enough old mining activity in the area that nobody will question it. We can say ground-penetrating radar found dangerous subsidence, risk of collapse." "Good. Sarah, I need you to contact every ranch within 20 miles of the site. Let them know we're closing the area for safety reasons. Ask them to keep their people away." "What about hunters?" Billy asked. "It's bow season for elk. The National Forest sees traffic this time of year." "Forest Service closure," Marcus said. "Coordinate with them. Cite the same mining hazard. Better yet, see if we can get them to declare a temporary fire risk closure. The wind's been bad. They won't fight us on it." "And what do we tell people who ask why this is all happening right now?" Sarah's dark eyes were sharp. "Because someone will ask. Someone always does." Marcus met her gaze. "We tell them we're doing our jobs, protecting public safety. If anyone pushes harder," he paused, "then we tell them sheriff's orders, and that's the end of it." "What about you, boss?" Tom asked. "What will you be doing?" "What my father did," Marcus said quietly. "What my family has been doing for 136 years. I'll be out there, making sure nobody gets close enough to see what they shouldn't see." The meeting broke up with assignments distributed and a plan in motion. As his deputies filed out, Donna lingered, her hand on Marcus's arm. "Your father was standing guard alone when his heart gave out," she said. "You are not doing this by yourself. Tom, Sarah, Billy, they'll back you up whether you ask them to or not. That's what a department does." "Donna, I can't ask them to." "You're not asking, I'm telling you." Her grip tightened. "Besides, you heard the story. Patience needs 43 souls. If someone does stumble into that place, God forbid, you're going to need backup to pull them out before sunrise. You can't do that alone." She was right, and Marcus knew it. He nodded slowly. "Okay, but they stay outside the perimeter. Nobody enters Patience itself. Nobody. Deal." Over the next 9 days, Carver County Sheriff's Department executed the most elaborate public safety operation in its history. Roadblocks went up on Highway 287, manned by deputies and state troopers. The Forest Service issued an emergency closure for 40,000 acres, citing dangerous fire conditions despite the recent snow. Ranchers were notified. Local news ran stories about historic mining hazards. And Tom even got the county to bring in ground-penetrating radar equipment to make it look official. Marcus barely slept. When he wasn't coordinating the operation, he was at the Historical Society with Eleanor, poring over every scrap of information about Patience. They found scattered references, a mention in a Wyoming territorial newspaper about a promising new mining community, a land deed filed in 1887, a single photograph from 1888 showing a rough main street with a few wooden buildings. In the photograph, Marcus could make out a sign, Patience Mercantile. It was the same store he'd entered. And there, standing in front of the building with a hammer in his hand, was a man who looked eerily like Marcus's father. His great-great-grandfather William Webb, frozen in time before everything went wrong. On the evening of October 16th, Marcus assembled his team at the office one final time. Tom, Sarah, and Billy wore serious expressions, their gear checked and double-checked. Donna had prepared thermoses of coffee and enough supplies for a long night. "Last chance to back out," Marcus said. "Nobody will think less of you." "With all due respect, Sheriff," Sarah said, "shut up. We're going. Billy nodded nervously. Tom just grinned. Hell, Marcus, I've worked worse details. Remember the Sanderson standoff? 8 hours in a cow pasture in July? At least tonight's cool. At 4:30 p.m., they caravanned north on Highway 287, passing through the roadblocks and into the closed zone. The sun was already low on the horizon, painting the prairie in shades of amber and red. They set up their command post at the exact spot where Marcus had parked 9 days earlier, 4 vehicles arranged in a semicircle with lights and radios. "Sunset's at 6:47, Tom announced, checking his watch. "If this is gonna happen, it should be soon after." The wind picked up as the sun sank lower, carrying that same sweet rot smell Marcus remembered. The temperature dropped precipitously, going from 40 degrees to freezing in what felt like minutes. And then, as the last sliver of sun vanished below the horizon, the lights began to appear. This time, Marcus wasn't alone in seeing them. Sarah gasped, Billy swore softly, and even Tom took an involuntary step backward. The lights bloomed across the prairie like stars fallen to earth, dozens, then hundreds of them, orange and flickering and impossibly bright. And behind the lights, the buildings rose. It was like watching a photograph develop in reverse. The structures materialized out of nothing, gaining solidity and detail with each passing second. Within 5 minutes, patience stood before them in all its impossible glory, solid and real and utterly wrong. "Jesus Christ," Billy whispered. "It's really there." The town looked exactly as Marcus remembered. Wooden buildings arranged in neat streets, smoke rising from chimneys, lights burning in every window. But now, with his team beside him, he could see more details. People moved behind the windows, shadows passing back and forth. From somewhere deep in the town came the faint sound of a piano playing a ragtime tune. "Can they see us?" Sarah asked. Marcus didn't know. But as he watched, a figure appeared in the main street. A woman in a long dress, the same woman who'd spoken to him before. She stood perfectly still, looking directly at them across the distance. Then she raised her hand and beckoned. "Nobody moves," Marcus ordered. "Nobody goes closer. We watch, we wait, and we make sure nobody else gets near. Understood?" 3 voices answered in unison. "Yes, sir." The night had just begun, and Patience was awake and hungry. The first hour passed in tense silence. Marcus and his team stood at their vehicles, watching Patience glow in the darkness like a jewel box opened in the void. The town looked almost inviting from this distance. Warm lights, smoke curling from chimneys, the occasional shadow moving behind curtained windows. It could have been any frontier town on a cold October night, except for the fact that it existed in a place where nothing should be. Tom had set up a perimeter with road flares, creating a rough circle about a quarter mile from the town's nearest edge. "Psychological barrier," he'd explained. "Anyone who gets past our roadblocks, if they make it this far, they'll see the flares and know they're not supposed to cross." "Assuming they listen," Sarah had replied, her hand resting unconsciously on her sidearm. At 8:15 p.m., Marcus's radio crackled. "Unit 1, this is Checkpoint Alpha." It was Deputy Rick Harrison manning the southern roadblock. "We've got a situation. 2 vehicles just tried to bypass the closure, driving through ranch land. I can see their headlights about 3 miles south of your position, heading your way." Marcus's stomach dropped. "Can you intercept?" "Negative. They're off-road, moving fast. I've got troopers responding, but they're at least 15 minutes out." "Copy that. We'll handle it." Marcus turned to his team. "Sarah, Billy, with me. Tom, you stay here and coordinate. If anyone else shows up, you stop them, whatever it takes." They piled into Marcus's Silverado, and he gunned the engine, heading south across the prairie toward the approaching headlights. The terrain was rough, full of hidden gullies and rocks that could shred a tire or snap an axle. But Marcus had grown up hunting these lands. He knew where to drive and where not to.
They intercepted the vehicles, a Jeep Wrangler and a Ford F-150. Marcus pulled across their path, lights flashing, and jumped out before they'd fully stopped. The Jeep's driver was a man in his 30s wearing expensive outdoor gear, the kind sold in Jackson Hole boutiques to tourists who wanted to look rugged. The passenger was a woman, about the same age, equally well-equipped. The F-150 held two more people, younger, maybe mid-20s. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" the Jeep driver demanded, climbing out. "You can't just block public land." "This area is closed by order of the Carver County Sheriff's Department and the U.S. Forest Service," Marcus said, his voice flat and professional. "You need to turn around immediately." "We have permits," the woman said, waving papers. "We're archaeologists from the University of Wyoming. We have authorization to conduct surveys in this region." Marcus's blood ran cold. Archaeologists? Of course. If word had somehow gotten out about Patience, about a ghost town that appeared once every 136 years, researchers would come running. "Your permits don't override an emergency closure," Sarah said, stepping forward. "There's been a hazmat incident. This entire area is contaminated." "That's bullshit," one of the younger people said, a woman with her hair in a braid. "We've been monitoring the closure notices. First it was mining subsidence, then fire risk, now hazmat? You're covering something up." "We know about Patience," the Jeep driver said, and Marcus felt the bottom drop out of his world. "We know the stories. October 17th, 1889, the disappearance. Dr. Eleanor Ashford was kind enough to share her research with us when we reached out to her last month about local legends." Marcus was going to have a very serious conversation with Eleanor. But first, he had to deal with this. "I don't care what stories you've heard," he said. "This land is closed. You're trespassing in a hazard zone. You can leave voluntarily right now, or I can arrest all four of you for interfering with emergency operations." The archaeologist opened his mouth to argue, but then his eyes shifted past Marcus toward the north. His face went pale. "Holy shit. Is that it?" Marcus turned. From this position, with a slight rise in elevation, Patience was visible over the prairie, a glowing constellation of lights impossible to mistake for anything natural. "It's real," the woman whispered. "It's actually real." "Get back in your vehicles," Marcus ordered. But they weren't listening anymore. The archaeologist was pulling out a camera. The others were moving forward, drawn by the impossible sight. "This is incredible," the younger man breathed. "Do you have any idea what this means? A complete temporal displacement event, or possibly a dimensional overlap. The readings we could get." Billy moved to block them, but the braided woman ducked around him, running toward the lights. Marcus lunged after her, catching her arm. She spun, wild-eyed and desperate. "You don't understand. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We can document it, study it, maybe even help those people." "Those people are beyond help," Marcus said harshly. "And if you go into that town, you'll be beyond help too. Is that what you want? To be trapped in 1889 forever, reliving the same night over and over while something feeds on your soul?" That stopped her. The fervor in her eyes dimmed, replaced by fear. What do you mean?" Marcus released her arm. The four archaeologists were staring at him now, really listening for the first time. He made a decision, the truth, or enough of it to save their lives. "Patience isn't just a ghost town," he said. "It's a trap. 43 people went in on October 17th, 1889. They never came out. They're still in there, still living that same night, still dying that same death. Whatever took them, whatever lives in that place, it's hungry. And if you go in there," he pointed at the glowing town, "you become part of the menu. Forever." "That's not scientifically possible," the lead archaeologist said, but his voice was uncertain. You're looking at something that isn't scientifically possible, Sarah said. So maybe start believing what the sheriff is telling you. A sound cut through the night, a scream, high and agonized, coming from patients. It lasted maybe 5 seconds before cutting off abruptly. The archaeologists flinched. The braided woman started to cry. "What was that?" the younger man asked, his voice shaking. "That was someone dying," Marcus said quietly. "Someone who's been dying every night for 136 years. And if you go in there, that will be you." He let that sink in for a moment, watching their faces cycle through disbelief, horror, and finally acceptance. The lead archaeologist lowered his camera slowly. "We'll go," he said. "But Sheriff, someone needs to document this. Someone needs to record what's happening here."
"For science, for history, for nothing," Marcus interrupted. "Some things aren't meant to be documented. Some things are meant to be contained and forgotten. This is one of them." He jerked his thumb toward the south. "Get in your vehicles and drive. Don't stop until you're out of the county. If I see any of you back here, I'll arrest you and hold you for 72 hours. By then, patients will be gone again, and you'll have missed your chance. Clear?" They nodded, subdued. 10 minutes later, Marcus watched their taillights disappear into the darkness, heading back the way they'd come. He radioed the roadblocks to make sure they actually left, then turned the Silverado north, back toward the perimeter. "That was close," Billy said from the back seat. "Too close," Marcus agreed. "Sarah, radio Tom. Tell him we need every available unit on those roadblocks."
Nobody else gets through. They returned to find Tom standing at the edge of the flare line, staring at patients with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. When they climbed out, Tom didn't turn around. "While you were gone," Tom said, "I saw someone walking the streets. Looked familiar." "Tom." "It was my uncle, Marcus." Tom's voice was steady but strained. "My uncle Danny. He disappeared in 1967 when he was 19 years old. Went hiking in this area and never came home. We always assumed he fell into a ravine or got lost in the wilderness." He finally turned to face Marcus. "He's in there, walking around like it's any other day. He hasn't aged a day." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Tom, I'm sorry, but you can't." "I know I can't go in there," Tom said. "I know what happens if I do. But Jesus, Marcus, he's been trapped in that place for 58 years. My aunt never remarried. She died last year, still wearing her wedding ring, still hoping he'd come home someday." "I'm sorry," Marcus said again, inadequately. What else could he say? That Tom's uncle was one of the unlucky souls who'd wandered into patients during a previous appearance? That he was part of the 43 now, or maybe more if others had been taken over the decades? A new sound drifted from the town, church bells ringing clear and sweet across the prairie. Marcus checked his watch, 9 p.m. exactly. As the bells faded, figures began to emerge from the buildings, walking toward the church. Men in work clothes, women in long dresses, children holding their parents' hands. They moved slowly, mechanically, like actors in a play they'd performed 1,000 times. "They're going to service," Sarah said, watching through binoculars. "I can see, oh God, Marcus, there are more than 43 people." Marcus took the binoculars. She was right. He counted at least 60 people filing toward the church. 60 souls trapped in patience's endless night. "How many appearances have there been?" Billy asked. "Since 1889? Marcus did the math in his head. "This is the 6th. 1889, then 136 years later in 2025. Wait," he recalculated. "No. It appeared in 1889, then would have appeared in," he counted on his fingers. "This doesn't make sense. 136 years from 1889 would be 2025, but that's this year." "Maybe the cycle isn't exact," Sarah suggested. "Or,"
Tom's radio squawked. "All units, this is Checkpoint Bravo. We've got multiple vehicles approaching from the north, at least 5, maybe more. They're not stopping for the barriers. Repeat, they are not stopping." "Who are they?" Marcus demanded. "Can't tell, Sheriff. They're running without lights. Wait, the sound of an engine revving, then a crash. They just rammed through the barrier."
"Units in pursuit, but they're heading straight for your position. ETA 5 minutes." Marcus swore. "Everyone in the vehicles now. We need to set up a hard stop." They scrambled into action, moving the trucks to form a barricade across the most accessible approach route. Marcus grabbed a shotgun from his vehicle, racking around. He didn't want to shoot anyone, but he would if it meant keeping them out of patience. The vehicles appeared suddenly, 5 pickup trucks running dark, bouncing across the rough terrain at dangerous speeds. They were heading straight for Patience, and they weren't slowing down. "Sheriff's Department," Marcus shouted through his vehicle's PA system. "Stop your vehicles immediately. This is your only warning." The lead truck swerved but didn't stop, trying to go around the barricade. Marcus fired a warning shot into the air. The truck skidded to a halt, and the others followed suit. Doors opened and men piled out, 8 of them, all locals by the look of their clothing and trucks. Marcus recognized the leader immediately, Dale Mercer, a rancher whose family had been in Carver County for generations. Dale was in his 50s, weathered and tough, and he was carrying a rifle. "Stand down, Dale," Marcus called, his shotgun held low but ready. "Whatever you think you're doing, this isn't the way." "You know why I'm here, Sheriff," Dale called back. His voice was rough with emotion. "Same reason you're here. Same reason your daddy was here 22 years ago. It's our burden, our family's burden." And suddenly, Marcus understood. "Mercer, John Mercer, he was your ancestor." "My great-great-great-grandfather," Dale confirmed. "The mine foreman, the man who broke through to the chamber that should never have been opened. The man who brought this curse down on Patience." He gestured to the men with him. "We're all descended from the founders. The Sullivan brothers over there, their ancestor ran the saloon. Pete Dawson, his great-great-grandmother owned the hotel. All of us, Sheriff, all carrying the weight of what our families did." "Then you know you can't go in there," Marcus said. "You know what happens." "We know," another man said, one of the Sullivans. "But maybe it's time we fixed what our ancestors broke. Maybe it's time someone went in there and ended this." "You can't end it," Tom said, stepping forward. "You'll just become part of it. More fuel for the long dark." "Maybe," Dale said, "or maybe if enough of us go in, if we confront whatever's down in that mine, we can destroy it. Free those people. End the cycle." "That's suicide," Sarah said flatly. "Maybe, but doing nothing is cowardice." Dale's jaw set stubbornly. "My whole life I've known about Patience. My father told me the stories, same way his father told him. Every 136 years, the town appears, and our families have to watch it happen, knowing our ancestors are trapped in there, suffering." "Well, I'm done watching." "Dale, listen to me," Marcus said, lowering his shotgun slightly. "My great-great-grandfather William Webb survived because he wasn't there that night. He spent the rest of his life trying to find a way to save his family. He failed. My father tried too. He died the day after standing guard in 2003. If there was a way to end this, don't you think someone would have found it by now?" "Maybe they were looking in the wrong place," Dale said. "Maybe they needed to go into the mine itself, face the long dark directly." A woman's voice cut through the standoff. "They tried that." Everyone turned. The woman from Patience stood at the edge of the flare line, as solid and real as any of them. Marcus's team raised their weapons, but she held up her hands in a placating gesture. "Please," she said, "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here to stop you from making a terrible mistake." "Who are you?" Dale demanded. "My name is Catherine Mercer," she said.
I was John Mercer's wife. And I'm telling you, Dale, yes, I know who you are. I've seen you before during the appearances. Going into that mine won't save anyone. It will only add to the count. How do you know? Dale's voice cracked. How do you know unless someone tries? Catherine's expression was infinitely sad. Because we already tried. On the first night, before we understood what was happening, John and 5 other men went down into the mine. They thought they could close the chamber, seal whatever had been released. They never came back up. We heard them screaming for 3 hours. And when the next appearance came, 136 years later, she shook her head. They were still down there, still screaming. The long dark doesn't just consume you. It makes sure you never stop being consumed. The fight seemed to drain out of Dale. He lowered his rifle slowly. So, we just accept it? Let you suffer forever? You keep people safe, Catherine said firmly. You do what Marcus's family has been doing. You stand guard and you make sure the 43 doesn't become 44 or 60 or 100. Because if enough people enter patience, if the long dark gets strong enough, she looked toward the town, fear evident on her face. It won't need to wait 136 years anymore. It will be able to reach out farther, take people from their homes, their beds. The whole county could become like Patience. Maybe the whole state. Jesus Christ, Pete Dawson whispered. How do we know you're telling the truth? One of the Sullivan brothers asked. Maybe you're trying to protect that thing. Maybe you're part of it. Catherine smiled sadly. I'm part of it whether I want to be or not. We all are. Everyone trapped in Patience. But I still remember who I was. I still remember loving my husband and my daughter and the life we were building. And I don't want anyone else to lose what we lost. She turned to Marcus. Your great-great-grandfather was a good man, Sheriff Webb. He made my daughter a dollhouse, spent weeks carving tiny furniture for it. She loved that dollhouse. I held her while she died, and she kept asking for her daddy, asking when he was coming home. Tears streaked Catherine's face. William never came home. He lived, and that's good. Someone had to survive to warn others. Someone had to remember us as more than just a ghost story. Marcus felt tears on his own cheeks. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Just do your job. Keep people away. Catherine began to fade, becoming translucent. Dawn is still hours away. The long dark will get hungrier as the night goes on. It will call to people, show them things they want to see. Don't listen. Don't look too long. And whatever you do, don't cross into the town. She vanished completely. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Dale Mercer let out a long, shuddering breath and lowered his rifle completely. She's right, he said. Damn it all, she's right. We can't fix this. All we can do is contain it. He looked at his men. Anyone who wants to leave, go. No shame in it. But I'm staying here until dawn. I'm going to make sure not one more person adds to my family's sin. The other men nodded, grim-faced. One by one, they moved their trucks to reinforce the barricade, adding their vehicles to Marcus's. Appreciate the backup, Tom said to Dale. Least we can do, Dale replied. My great-great-great-grandfather woke this thing up. My family owes a debt. Marcus organized the expanded group, setting up a proper perimeter with overlapping fields of view. They had 13 people now, enough to cover all the approaches to Patience. He assigned positions, set up a rotation so people could rest, and made sure everyone understood the stakes. At 11:30 p.m., the temperature dropped again, plummeting to near zero. Frost formed on windshields and beards. From Patience came the sound of singing, a hymn, voices raised in desperate harmony. Marcus recognized the tune from his grandmother's church,
Abide with me. Abide with me. Fast falls the event tide. The darkness deepens. Lord, with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless, oh, abide with me. The voices were beautiful and terrible, filled with a longing that cut straight to the soul. Marcus saw Billy wiping his eyes, saw Sarah turn away. Even Dale Mercer, tough as boot leather, looked stricken. The singing continued for 20 minutes, then stopped abruptly. In the silence that followed, a child began to cry, a sound so heartbroken that Marcus had to grip his truck's door handle to keep from running toward it.
"Don't listen," Tom said, his voice strained. "She said it would try to call to us. This is it. This is the long dark trying to lure us in. There's a kid in there," Billy said. "A kid crying for help." "There are lots of kids in there," Sarah said firmly, "and we can't help them. We can only make sure no one else joins them." The crying faded, replaced by a new sound. Laughter. Bright, happy laughter, like you'd hear at a family picnic or a birthday party. It came from the center of town, from somewhere near the church. Lights began to dance in the windows, shadows moving in patterns that seemed designed to draw the eye. "It's putting on a show," Marcus said, trying to make it look inviting. But it was working. Marcus could feel the pull, the desire to walk those streets, to see what was behind those lights. Part of him whispered that maybe Catherine was wrong. Maybe there was a way to help. Maybe he could find it where others had failed. He shook his head violently, dispelling the thoughts. This was how it worked. This was how the long dark fed. At 1:17 a.m., Marcus's radio crackled with Donna's voice from the main office. "Sheriff, we've got a problem. I've been monitoring social media, and there are posts going up about a mysterious ghost town visible in Carver County. Photos, too, taken from the ridgeline about 8 miles east of your position. They're going viral. We've got people asking for directions, talking about coming to see it." Marcus swore. "Can you shut down the posts?" "Not fast enough. They're already being shared. Sheriff, by morning, we could have hundreds of people trying to get here. Call in every favor we have with the state police. I want roadblocks on every highway, every back road. Nobody gets within 10 miles of this location. Copy that. Marcus, be careful. If that many people show up, you won't be able to stop them all." She was right. If dawn didn't come soon enough, if people started arriving before patients vanished, things could go very, very wrong. At 2:33 a.m., they got their first indication of just how wrong. Sarah, watching the eastern approach through night vision binoculars, suddenly stiffened. "Sheriff, we've got movement. Lots of it. Maybe 24 people on foot coming from the direction of the National Forest." Marcus grabbed his own binoculars. She was right. A group of people, walking in a loose formation, heading straight for patients. They moved strangely, too coordinated, their pace identical. "Challenge them," Marcus ordered. "Light them up." Tom turned on the truck spotlight, the brilliant beam sweeping across the approaching figures. What Marcus saw made his blood freeze. They weren't people. Not anymore. They looked human at first glance. The right shape, the right proportions. But their movements were wrong, mechanical, and precise. Their faces were blank, expressionless. And when the light hit them, their eyes reflected like an animal's, glowing with a sickly yellow light. "What the hell are those?" Billy whispered. Catherine's voice answered from behind them, making everyone jump. She'd returned, standing just outside the perimeter. "Those are echoes," she said. "People who got too close to patients during previous appearances. They didn't enter the town, but they stayed too long, looked too hard. Part of them was caught. They're drawn back every time patients appears, trying to complete the journey. But they're not really alive anymore. They're just echoes of what they were." "Will they try to enter?" Marcus asked.
They'll try to make you let them pass, and if you're not careful, they'll try to take you with them. The echoes had stopped about 50 yards from the perimeter. They stood in perfect silence, swaying slightly, their glowing eyes fixed on Patience. Then, as one, they began to speak. "Let us pass. Let us pass.
Let us pass." The voices were identical, overlapping, creating a horrible harmony that set Marcus's teeth on edge. The echoes began to walk forward again, slow and inexorable. "Sheriff?" Sarah's hand was on her weapon. "What do we do?" Marcus had no idea. How did you stop something that wasn't quite alive? He looked at Catherine desperately. "Iron," she said. The old stories were right about that much. Iron disrupts them, burns them like acid. Any iron will work. Tools, horseshoes, even nails. "We don't have—" Marcus stopped. "The trucks. Steel frames, iron engine blocks." "Form a line," Tom barked, already understanding. "Use the vehicles as a barrier." They scrambled to reposition the trucks, creating a solid wall of steel and iron between the echoes and Patience. The echoes reached the line and stopped, pressing against the vehicles like insects against a window. Where they touched the metal, smoke rose, and they jerked back, hissing. "Let us pass! Let us pass!"
Let us pass. But they couldn't cross. They paced along the line of vehicles, searching for a gap, but finding none. After 10 minutes, they began to retreat, backing away in that same synchronized movement until they disappeared into the darkness. "How many times has this happened?" Marcus asked Catherine. "How many echoes are out there?" "I don't know. Dozens, maybe. They don't all come every time. But the longer Patience exists, the more echoes are created. Another reason to keep people away. It's not just about preventing them from entering. It's about preventing them from becoming that." The night wore on. At 3:45 a.m., the laughter from the town turned to screams again, the same agonized shrieks that had frightened the archaeologists. At 4:12, figures appeared in the streets of Patience, running as if pursued, though nothing visible chased them. At 4:51, the church caught fire, flames consuming the steeple in seconds. But within minutes, the fire was gone, and the church stood intact once more. Death and rebirth, over and over, trapped in an endless loop. Marcus checked his watch constantly, counting down the minutes to dawn. Sunrise was at 6:47 a.m. They had less than 2 hours to hold the line. At 5:33 a.m., headlights appeared on the horizon. Not 2 or 3 vehicles, dozens of them, maybe more. The convoy that Donna had warned about had arrived. "Here we go," Tom muttered. "Everyone ready?" Marcus picked up his radio. "All units, this is Sheriff Webb. We have civilians approaching in large numbers. Priority 1 is keeping them out of the perimeter. Use any non-lethal means necessary. If anyone crosses the line," he paused, "we pull them back, whatever it takes." The convoy arrived in a chaos of engines and voices. Cars, trucks, RVs, even a few motorcycles. People poured out, carrying cameras, phones, camping equipment. Most were young, drawn by the social media posts. Some were older, conspiracy theorists and paranormal enthusiasts who'd been waiting their whole lives for something like this. And they all wanted to see Patience. "This is a restricted area," Marcus shouted through the PA. "Emergency closure in effect. Return to your vehicles immediately." Nobody listened. They pressed forward, and Marcus's makeshift force of 13 couldn't possibly hold them all back. Some tried to argue, some tried to push through, some simply ran around the sides of the perimeter. Marcus grabbed a young man who ducked under one of the trucks. "Stop! You can't go in there." "It's public land," the man shouted back. "You can't stop me. I'm trying to save your life." But the man pulled free and ran toward Patience. Others followed, breaking through the line in 3 different places. Marcus counted at least 10 people sprinting toward the town, laughing and shouting, phones held high to record their adventure.
Go! Marcus yelled to his team. Get them back!
They ran after the civilians, but it was too late. The first person, a woman in her 20s wearing a college sweatshirt, crossed into Patience Main Street. She stopped, looking around in wonder at the impossible town. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she started to scream. The sound cut off abruptly, and she vanished. Not gradually, not fading, just gone in an instant. The 9 others who'd entered stopped dead, suddenly understanding the danger. They turned to run back, but they were moving slowly now, as if wading through honey. Marcus reached the town's edge, but Catherine materialized in front of him, blocking his path. Don't! If you cross the threshold, you can't come back. They're going to die. They're already dead. The moment they entered, they were claimed.
All you can do is honor their memory and make sure no one else follows. Marcus watched helplessly as the 9 civilians struggled toward the town's edge, moving slower with each step. Behind them, the buildings of Patience seemed to pulse, growing more solid, more real. The street beneath their feet began to change, becoming the packed earth of 1889. One of them, a teenage boy, reached the boundary. His hand stretched toward Marcus, fingers just inches from freedom. "Help me," he gasped. "Please, I don't want to—" He vanished like the woman before him. One by one, the others disappeared. Within 2 minutes, all 10 were gone, claimed by Patience in the long dark. The remaining civilians stood frozen in shock, finally understanding that this wasn't a spectacle or an adventure. It was a tomb. "Everyone back," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "Everyone get back now, please." This time, they listened. The crowd retreated to the perimeter, silent and shaken. Some were crying. Most looked like they were in shock. Marcus stood at the edge of Patience, staring at the place where 10 people had vanished. 10 souls he'd failed to protect. 10 more names to add to the count of the damned. Behind him, Tom put a hand on his shoulder. "It's not your fault, Marcus. I should have stopped them. You tried. We all tried." Tom's voice was heavy. "But you can't save people who don't believe they need saving." The sky was beginning to lighten in the east. Dawn was coming. Marcus checked his watch. 6:22 a.m. 25 minutes until sunrise. Patience seemed to sense the approaching end of its window. The lights in the buildings burned brighter, and the sounds from within grew louder. Music, voices, the clatter of wagons on dirt roads. It was as if the town was trying to pack as much existence as possible into its remaining time. Catherine appeared beside Marcus one last time. "They'll remember," she said, gesturing to the crowd of civilians watching from the perimeter. "They'll tell others what they saw. Maybe that's good. Maybe more people knowing the truth will keep more people safe. Or it will bring more people looking," Marcus said bitterly. "Then you'll be here to stop them, you and your family, as you've always been." She looked at the brightening sky. "Dawn is close. We'll fade soon, back to wherever we go between appearances. Back to the long dark." She met Marcus's eyes. "Thank you for trying to protect us. Even though we're beyond protection, it matters that someone cares enough to stand guard. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. You did save us, in a way. You saved us from becoming more than we are. You kept the horror contained." She began to fade. 136 years from now, someone from your family will be standing here again. Tell them we're still human. Still fighting to remember who we were. Tell them not to give up on us." "I will," Marcus promised. Catherine smiled and vanished. As the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, Patience began to fade. The lights dimmed, the buildings became translucent, and the sounds grew distant.
Within 5 minutes, there was nothing but empty prairie, as if the town had never been. But Marcus knew it had been real. 10 new souls would attest to that when patients appeared again in 2161. He turned to face the assembled civilians. "You need to leave now. All of you. This area is still closed. What you saw tonight," he paused. "What you saw tonight is why it's closed. Tell whoever you want. Post whatever you want. But understand this. If you come back, if you try to enter that place when it appears again, you won't come home. That's not a threat. That's a promise." The crowd dispersed slowly, vehicles starting up and pulling away.
Some people looked back, as if trying to glimpse one last trace of patience. There was nothing to see. By 8 a.m., everyone was gone, except Marcus, his deputies, and Dale Mercer's group. They stood together in the cold morning light, exhausted and traumatized. "It's over," Billy said. "For now." "For 136 years," Marcus corrected. "By then, I'll be dead. My kids will be old or dead. This will be someone else's problem." "Your family's problem," Dale said, "like it's been for generations. But you won't be alone. My family will be here too, and the Sullivans, and the Dawsons. All of us whose ancestors made this nightmare. We'll help carry the burden." Marcus nodded, grateful for the support. They packed up the perimeter equipment and started the drive back to town. As they passed through the roadblocks, Marcus radioed Donna. "Donna, we're coming in. It's done." "Thank God," she said. "Marcus, are you okay?" He thought about the 10 people who'd vanished. About Catherine Mercer and the 43, now 53, souls trapped in endless torment. About his great-great-grandfather William, who'd gone mad from grief. About his father, who died standing guard against darkness. "No," he said honestly, "but I will be. Eventually." The days following October 17th were among the strangest in Carver County's history. The story spread like wildfire, not through official channels, but through social media, blog posts, and YouTube videos uploaded by the witnesses. Within 48 hours, the patience phenomenon was trending nationally. News crews arrived from Denver, Salt Lake City, even as far as New York. They set up in Carver's tiny downtown, interviewing anyone who'd talk. Most locals refused, but the tourists who'd witnessed the disappearances were eager to share their experiences. Their accounts were remarkably consistent. A ghost town that appeared out of nowhere, people who entered and vanished, and a sheriff who tried desperately to keep everyone away. Marcus gave exactly one interview to a reporter from the Wyoming Tribune-Eagle. He kept it brief and factual. There had been an unusual atmospheric phenomenon. Some people had gotten disoriented and wandered off. Search and rescue operations were ongoing. He knew no one believed him, but it was the official story, and he stuck to it. The families of the 10 missing people were another matter entirely. They descended on Carver demanding answers, threatening lawsuits, accusing Marcus of negligence. He met with each family personally, even though his lawyer advised against it. He looked them in the eyes and told them the truth. Their loved ones had ignored repeated warnings, had entered a dangerous area, and were now missing. He promised that search operations would continue, knowing it was a lie. There was nothing to find and nothing to search for. 2 families filed lawsuits. The county's insurance company would handle it. Marcus knew he'd done everything he could, but that knowledge didn't ease the weight of their grief or his guilt. The FBI got involved on day 3, sending agents to investigate the disappearances. Marcus met with them in his office. 2 agents, 1 male and 1 female, both with the polished professionalism of federal law enforcement. "Sheriff Webb," the male agent said, "Agent Morrison, we've reviewed your report. We have some questions." "Of course." 10 people vanished without a trace in a matter of minutes. No bodies, no evidence,
No witnesses to what actually happened to them after they entered this location. Morrison flipped through his notes. You were there. You saw them enter. What did you see after that? Marcus had rehearsed this. It was dark. Visibility was poor. They ran into the affected area and I lost sight of them. When my deputies and I attempted to follow, we encountered disorienting conditions, possible gas emissions from underground sources. By the time we could safely enter, they were gone. Gas emissions, the female agent, Agent Chen, said flatly. That caused 10 people to vanish. I don't know what caused them to vanish, Agent Chen. I know they went into an area we'd closed for safety reasons, and I know we can't find them. Morrison leaned forward. Sheriff, we've spoken to witnesses. They describe buildings appearing out of nowhere, streets that shouldn't exist. They say people literally disappeared in front of them, just faded away. Mass hallucination is a documented phenomenon, Marcus said, especially in stressful situations with large groups.
Add in the darkness, the isolation, possibly some gas emissions. Do you believe that? Chen interrupted. Do you honestly believe that's what happened? Marcus met her eyes steadily. I believe 10 people are missing, and I failed to protect them. Beyond that, Agent Chen, I believe my job is to make sure it doesn't happen again. The agents left after 3 hours of questioning. Marcus knew they didn't believe him, but they also had no evidence of wrongdoing. The case would remain open, the disappearances unsolved. Another set of mysteries added to America's long list of people who'd vanished without explanation. Eleanor Ashford was less forgiving. She appeared in Marcus's office on day 5, her face drawn with anger and disappointment. You gave them my research, Marcus said before she could speak. Those archaeologists. You told them about patients. I told them legends, said, stories, folklore. I didn't think. She sank into a chair across from his desk. I didn't think it was real, Marcus. Not really. I thought it was just a story that grew in the telling, like so many frontier tales. When they asked about local legends for their research project, I shared what I knew. I never imagined they'd actually find it. They found it, and because of that, 10 more people are trapped in that hell. Eleanor flinched as if he'd struck her. I know, and I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But Marcus, you need to understand, I've been studying this county's history for 50 years. I've read every account, examined every document. Nothing I found suggested Patience was anything more than a tragic disappearance that got mythologized over time. If I'd known, if I truly believed, you would have done what? Marcus asked, his anger fading into exhaustion. Kept it secret? Let those people stumble into it blind? At least they had some warning, even if they didn't listen. Is there really no way to save them? Eleanor's voice was small. In all your research, did you find anything? Any hint of how to break the cycle? Marcus thought about the long nights he'd spent since October 17th, poring over every document Eleanor had given him, searching online archives, even contacting paranormal researchers, though he'd been careful not to reveal too much. The answer was always the same. No, he said simply. Whatever the long dark is, whatever hold it has on those people, it's beyond anything we can fight. The best we can do is contain it, keep others from joining them. Eleanor stood slowly, looking every one of her 73 years. I'm closing the Historical Society's files on Patience, sealing them. If anyone asks, I'll say the records were destroyed in the courthouse fire. No more researchers, no more curious students. This ends with us. Thank you. After she left, Marcus sat alone in his office, listening to the sounds of his small-town police department. Donna on the phone with someone from the county commission. Tom typing up reports.
Sarah and Billy arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to buy lunch. Normal sounds, normal life, continuing despite the horror that had touched their corner of the world. His desk phone rang. Webb? Sheriff, this is Dr. Carla Martinez from the University of Wyoming Geology Department. I was hoping I could speak with you about the seismic readings we recorded on October 17th. Marcus's blood went cold. Seismic readings? Yes, our sensors picked up unusual activity in your area that night. Not an earthquake. The signature was all wrong. It was more like, well, like something massive shifting beneath the surface. Given the reports of missing people in that location, I thought you'd want to know. Can you send me the data? Of course. Sheriff, I have to ask, is there any possibility this is related to old mining operations? Because if there are unstable tunnels under that area, we could be looking at a catastrophic collapse risk. I'll look into it, Marcus said. Thank you for the information, Dr. Martinez. He hung up and immediately called the number Dale Mercer had given him. Dale answered on the second ring. Sheriff, we need to meet today and bring anyone from the founding families who can come. We have a problem. 2 hours later, Marcus stood in the community room of Carver's only church, facing 23 people, all descendants of Patience's founders. Dale Mercer was there, along with the Sullivan brothers, Pete Dawson, and others Marcus had never met. They ranged in age from early 20s to late 70s, and they all shared the same haunted look of people carrying an inherited burden. Marcus explained about the seismic readings. The university recorded massive underground movement during Patience's appearance, which means the long dark isn't just a metaphysical presence, it's physical, something real, something that exists beneath the ground where Patience stood. The mine, an elderly woman said. Marcus recognized her as Martha Sullivan, grandmother to the two brothers. John Mercer's mine. They said they broke through to a chamber that went down miles. Said the air that came up was warm and smelled wrong. If there's a physical component, said a younger man Marcus didn't know, then maybe there's a physical way to destroy it. Seal the chamber, collapse the mine. And risk waking it up outside of the cycle? Dale shook his head. Right now, the long dark only manifests every 136 years. If we go digging around down there, we might give it a way to reach the surface permanently. So what do? Martha asked. Wait another 136 years and hope it doesn't get stronger? Marcus had been thinking about this since seeing the seismic data. We establish a permanent watch. Not just during appearances, but year-round. Motion sensors, cameras, seismic monitors. If anything changes, if there's any activity in that area between cycles, we need to know immediately. That's a lot of equipment, Pete Dawson said. A lot of money. I'll handle the county resources, Marcus said, but I'll need private support too. This can't go through official channels completely, not without drawing attention we don't want. We'll fund it, Dale said immediately, whatever it costs. My family owes that much. All our families do, Martha added quietly. They spent the next 3 hours planning. They'd establish a foundation, ostensibly for wildlife preservation, that would manage the land where Patience appeared. The foundation would install monitoring equipment, maintain a patrol schedule, and ensure no development ever occurred in that area. Members of the founding families would serve on the board, and each generation would be brought into the secret when they came of age. It was the best solution Marcus could devise. Not perfect, but better than leaving the site unmonitored for 136 years. As the meeting broke up, a young woman approached him. She looked to be in her mid-20s, with Martha Sullivan's eyes and determined expression. Sheriff Webb, I'm Rachel Sullivan. I wanted to thank you for what you did, for trying to save those people. I failed to save them. You tried. That's more than most would do. She hesitated. My grandmother told me stories about Patience when I was growing up. I thought they were just family legends, you know? Ghost stories to make me behave. But seeing her face tonight, seeing all of them, She gestured to the departing group. This is real. And it's going to be my responsibility someday, isn't it? Mine and my generation's. Marcus looked at this young woman who's just had her worldview shattered, who was facing the reality that she'd inherited a nightmare. He remembered the feeling from 10 days ago, standing in the Historical Society with Eleanor, learning that his family's duty wasn't finished. Yeah, he said gently, someday it will be, but not for a long time, Rachel. And when that time comes, you won't be alone. None of us are alone in this. She nodded slowly. Can I ask you something? The people trapped in patience, do they know? Are they aware they're stuck in a loop? Or is it like a dream where each time feels like the first time? They know, Marcus said, remembering Catherine's sad smile and desperate words. They remember. Every appearance, every cycle. They know exactly what's happening to them. Rachel's face crumpled. God, that's so much worse. Being aware, remembering, and still having to go through it over and over? That's why we do this, Marcus said. We can't save them, but we can honor their suffering by making sure no one else joins them. We can make their endless nightmare mean something. The weeks turned into months. The media frenzy died down, moving on to other stories. The families of the missing held memorials, began the long process of grief. The lawsuits were settled quietly out of court. Life in Carver County returned to something approaching normal. But Marcus was changed. He saw it in the mirror every morning, new lines around his eyes, gray in his hair that hadn't been there before October 17th. He saw it in the way he flinched at certain sounds, church bells, children laughing, the hymn, "Abide with Me." He saw it in his dreams, where he walked Patience's streets and heard Catherine Mercer telling him about her daughter's dollhouse. Tom noticed, of course. They were having coffee at the office one November morning when Tom set down his mug and said, "You're not sleeping." "I sleep enough." "Marcus, I was there. I know what you saw. Hell, I saw my uncle walking around in that place 58 years after he vanished. You don't just get over something like that. I'm fine." "You're not fine, and that's okay." Tom leaned back in his chair. "When I was in the Army, I saw things, did things. Took me years to process it, and I had the VA and support groups and therapy. But this?" He gestured vaguely. "Who do you talk to about this? Who do you tell that you watched 10 people get eaten by darkness in a ghost town that shouldn't exist?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "You're right. I can't exactly schedule an appointment with a therapist. Hi, I'm dealing with trauma from guarding an interdimensional horror. They'd put me in the same asylum where my great-great-grandfather died. Talk to me then, or Sarah, or Billy. We were there. We believe you because we saw it too." Tom's expression was serious. "Don't carry this alone, Marcus. That's what killed your father, carrying it alone, thinking he had to be strong enough to handle it by himself." Marcus felt something break inside him. The walls he'd built up, the professional distance he'd maintained, all of it crumbled. "I can't stop thinking about them," he said, his voice rough. "Those 10 people. I see their faces. I remember their names. Jessica Morrison, 23, college student. David Chen, 19, aspiring filmmaker. Robert Jackson, 31, father of 2. I know all of them. And in 136 years, they'll be part of Patient's show. They'll be the ones screaming, dying, over and over. And it's because I failed." "You didn't fail," Tom said firmly. "They made a choice. A stupid, reckless choice, but their choice. I should have stopped them." "How? Shoot them? Tackle them? Chain them up?" Tom shook his head. "Marcus, you did everything you could. You set up roadblocks, you warned people, you stood between them and that town. But you can't save people from themselves." Marcus knew Tom was right, intellectually.
But knowing didn't ease the guilt. Over the following months, the Patients Protection Foundation, as they named it, took shape. They purchased the land where the town had appeared, a 40-square-mile parcel that cost nearly $2 million, funded entirely by the founding families. They installed seismic monitors, motion sensors, and a network of trail cameras.
They hired a security company to do monthly patrols with the cover story that they were protecting endangered species habitat. And they monitored. Every day, Marcus checked the readings. Every night before bed, he looked at the security feeds. The land remained quiet, undisturbed except by wildlife and the occasional confused hiker who wandered past the private property signs. Life went on. Sarah got engaged to a teacher from Casper. Billy started dating Eleanor's granddaughter, much to everyone's amusement. Tom retired in March, replaced by a competent young deputy named Lucas Martinez, who was told nothing about patients beyond the fact that certain areas of the county were off limits for reasons that weren't to be discussed. Marcus threw himself into his work, becoming the kind of sheriff his father had been, dedicated, thorough, always available. He attended every town council meeting, every community event.
He coached Little League, volunteered at the senior center, and made sure he was visible and present in the lives of his constituents. But at night, alone in his father's house, he researched. He contacted academics under false names, asking theoretical questions about temporal anomalies and dimensional overlap. He read every book on mythology, folklore, and ancient horrors he could find. He was looking for answers, for some precedent, some hint that humanity had faced something like the Long Dark before and survived. What he found was unsettling. Throughout history, across cultures, there were stories of places that shouldn't exist. Towns that appeared and disappeared. Buildings that were there one day and gone the next. People who vanished into thin air, sometimes reappearing years later, having not aged a day, speaking of time spent in places that couldn't be mapped or explained. The Romans called them loci damnati, damned places. The Japanese spoke of kamikakushi, spirited away. The Irish had tales of Tir na Nog, a land outside time. The Lakota, whose ancestors had hunted these very plains, had stories of spirit traps, places where the boundary between worlds grew thin and hungry things could reach through. It seemed humanity had always known about the spaces between, the places where reality grew thin. And throughout history, people had been taken by those places, lost to realms beyond human understanding. Patience was just one instance of a pattern as old as human civilization. That should have been comforting. At least he wasn't facing something unique. But instead, it terrified him. Because if this had been happening throughout human history, and no one had found a way to stop it, what hope did he have? In late March, Marcus received an email from Dr. Martinez, the geologist who'd contacted him about the seismic readings. She'd continued monitoring the site, and she had news.
Sheriff Webb, I wanted to update you on the ongoing seismic monitoring of the patient's location. Over the past 5 months, we've recorded 47 distinct events. Minor tremors mostly, nothing you'd feel on the surface. But they're regular, rhythmic, occurring every 3.7 days on average. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like it. Natural seismic activity is random, chaotic. This is organized. It's almost like, well, this is going to sound crazy, but it's almost like breathing. Like something down there is inhaling and exhaling. I've consulted with colleagues across the country, and no one has an explanation. I'd like to organize a proper geological survey of the area, bring in ground-penetrating radar, maybe drill some exploratory cores. With your permission, of course. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. Dr. Carla Martinez. Marcus stared at the email for a long time. Something breathing beneath the ground. The Long Dark.
living and waiting in its chamber deep below the prairie. Every 3.7 days, it inhaled, exhaled, maintained its existence in the darkness. He couldn't let researchers near it, couldn't risk them drilling down, potentially waking it fully. But he also couldn't just ignore this information. He called an emergency meeting of the Foundation board. They gathered at Dale Mercer's ranch house, 10 people sitting around a dining table, listening as Marcus explained the situation. "So it's alive," Martha Sullivan said when he finished. "Not just active during appearances, but alive all the time, breathing." "It appears so," Marcus confirmed. "Then we need to destroy it," said Rachel Sullivan, Martha's granddaughter, "before it gets stronger, before the next appearance." "And how do we do that? Drive a stake through its heart?" "Assuming it has a heart, assuming it's even vulnerable to physical attack. We could collapse the mine," suggested Pete Dawson, "fill it with concrete, seal it permanently. Or we could wake it up," Marcus said quietly. "We could trigger a response that lets it reach the surface outside the cycle. Think about what the seismic readings mean. It's breathing every 3.7 days. It's maintaining itself, keeping itself alive between appearances. If we interfere with that, we don't know what happens. Maybe it dies, or maybe it decides it doesn't need to wait 136 years anymore." The room fell silent. They were ordinary people, ranchers, teachers, small business owners, trying to make decisions about forces they didn't understand. It was, Marcus thought, the definition of impossible odds. "What would your father do?" Martha asked. Marcus thought about his father, Jackson Webb. Steady, dependable, carrying the weight of patience alone for decades. He'd play it safe. He'd monitor, he'd watch, and he'd make sure nothing changed. He'd maintain the status quo because the alternative was too risky. "Then that's what we do," Dale said. "We tell Dr. Martinez the land is protected habitat, threaten legal action if she pursues a survey. We keep monitoring. And we hope like hell that keeping the long dark locked in its cycle is enough." They voted, and it was unanimous. The Foundation would maintain its watch, would continue protecting the site, but would take no aggressive action unless circumstances changed dramatically. Marcus sent a polite but firm email to Dr. Martinez, explaining that the land was privately owned protected habitat and further research would not be permitted. She responded with disappointment and confusion, but agreed to respect the property rights. Crisis averted. For now. Spring turned to summer. The prairie bloomed with wildflowers, and tourists came to enjoy Wyoming's natural beauty, completely unaware of the horror sleeping beneath their feet. Marcus went through the motions of his job, attending to the normal crimes and accidents of county life. Drunk drivers, domestic disputes, missing livestock, the mundane concerns of a rural community. But every day, he checked the monitors. Every night, he reviewed the security footage. And every 3.7 days, the seismic sensors recorded that rhythmic pulse. Inhale, exhale, the long dark maintaining its terrible existence. In July, something changed. Marcus was in his office when the monitoring alert came through on his phone. Seismic activity at the patient's site, magnitude 2.1. Not dangerous, not even noticeable to anyone not specifically watching for it. But it was off schedule, only 2.3 days since the last pulse. He called Dale immediately. "Did you see it?" "Yeah." "Could be a hiccup, some kind of irregularity. Or it could be the cycle speeding up." "Jesus, Marcus, don't say that." But over the next week, it became clear that something was changing. The pulses came faster, every 3.2 days, then every 2.9 days. The magnitude increased slightly with each event, and the temperature at the site, monitored by their sensor network, began to rise. Just a degree or two,
but enough to notice. Marcus called another emergency meeting. This time, they invited Eleanor Ashford, despite her initial protests that she'd sealed those records and wanted nothing more to do with patients. "Something's waking up," Marcus said, displaying the data on Dale's laptop. "Either the cycle is accelerating or the long dark is becoming more active. Either way, we need to figure out why and what it means." Eleanor studied the graphs, her brow furrowed. "When is the next anniversary?" "The next date when patients could appear." Marcus had already calculated it. October 17th, 2025, 5 months ago. "No," Eleanor said slowly. "Not that anniversary. The original. When was the mine opened? When did they first break through to the chamber?" Marcus hadn't even thought of that. "I don't know. The records from before the disappearance are almost non-existent." "Almost," Eleanor emphasized. "But there's one source we haven't checked." She looked at Martha Sullivan. "Your family kept journals, didn't they? Multiple generations of them?" Martha nodded slowly. "Up in my attic. Haven't looked at them in years, but yes. My great-great-grandfather was Jacob Sullivan, one of the saloon owners. He kept detailed records." "We need those journals," Marcus said. 2 hours later, they were in Martha's attic, dust motes dancing in the light from a bare bulb, pulling out boxes that hadn't been opened in decades. The journals were there, leather-bound and fragile, filled with the spidery handwriting of a man who lived and died over a century ago. Rachel Sullivan, Martha's granddaughter, was the one who found it. She'd been carefully paging through a journal dated 1889, reading the daily entries about saloon operations and town gossip. Then she stopped, her face going pale. "Here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "July 23rd, 1889. Big news today. John Mercer and his crew broke through to a new chamber in the mine. They say it goes down further than they can measure, maybe miles. Air coming up smells strange, sulfurous. Mercer's excited, thinks they found the mother lode. But some of the miners are spooked. They say they heard sounds from down there, like breathing." July 23rd, 1889. Marcus checked his phone's calendar. That's 8 days from now. July 23rd. "And 3 months and 8 days after that," Eleanor said quietly, "patients disappeared." October 17th. "It's a gestation period," Rachel said, understanding dawning on her face. "They opened the chamber in July. The long dark woke up. And 3 months later, it was strong enough to take the whole town." Dale swore softly. "So what happens on July 23rd this year? Another appearance?" "Maybe," Marcus said, "or maybe something worse. The cycle was 136 years between appearances. But that was appearances of patients, the town itself. We don't know what happens on other significant dates." "We need to be ready," Tom said. He'd come out of retirement for this, unable to stay away when Marcus called. "Whatever's going to happen, we need to be there." They spent the next 8 days preparing. The foundation board agreed to assemble at the site on July 22nd and maintain a watch through July 24th. They brought supplies for 3 days, set up a proper base camp with generators and communications equipment. They notified the state police that there would be a large group on private land for wildlife observation and shouldn't be disturbed. And they waited. July 23rd dawned clear and hot, temperature already in the 80s by 9 a.m. Marcus stood at the edge of what he thought of as the patient zone, drinking coffee and watching the prairie shimmer in the heat. Around him, 23 people from the founding families maintained their vigil. Some had brought children, wanting them to understand the family legacy. Others came alone, carrying the weight of inherited guilt. Nothing happened all morning. The hours crawled past, marked by the relentless sun and the occasional call of a hawk. Some people dozed in the shade of vehicles. Others played cards or read books, trying to pass the time. At 2:47 p.m., the ground began to shake. It wasn't a huge tremor, maybe magnitude 3.5, enough to rattle things but not cause damage. But it was prolonged, lasting nearly 30 seconds, and the epicenter was clearly the old mine location. "Everyone okay?" Marcus called. People nodded, climbing to their feet, looking around nervously. Then the smell hit them. That same sweet rot odor Marcus remembered from October, but stronger now, overwhelming. It poured up from the ground like an invisible fog, making people gag and stumble away. "Get back," Marcus shouted. "Everyone back to the vehicles." They retreated to the perimeter they'd established, a quarter mile from the patient zone. From that safer distance, they watched as the air above the old mine location began to shimmer and distort, like heat waves, but wrong somehow, moving against the wind. "Is it appearing?" Billy asked, his voice tight with fear. "Is patience coming back?" But no buildings materialized. Instead, the ground itself began to change. The grass withered, dying in seconds and crumbling to dust. The soil darkened, becoming almost black. And in the center of the affected area, the earth began to sink, creating a depression that grew wider and deeper with each passing minute. "It's opening," Eleanor whispered. "The mine. Or the chamber below it. It's opening." They watched in horrified fascination as the depression became a pit, maybe 30 feet across, dropping down into darkness that seemed absolute and wrong. From that darkness came sounds, not breathing now, but something worse. Whispers. Thousands of them, overlapping and incomprehensible, like voices from a great distance trying desperately to be heard. And then something reached up from the pit. It wasn't a hand or a tentacle or anything Marcus could adequately describe. It was more like a shadow given substance, a darkness that moved with purpose and hunger. It stretched up from the pit, maybe 15 feet into the air, swaying like a cobra preparing to strike. Everyone stood frozen, unable to move or speak. The shadow thing seemed to be tasting the air, searching for something. It oriented on their group, and Marcus felt the weight of its attention like a physical pressure. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it withdrew. The shadow sank back into the pit, the whispers faded, and the darkness became slightly less absolute. The pit remained, but it was just a hole now, not a gateway. "What the hell was that?" Dale's voice shook. "That," Marcus said slowly, "was the long dark, or part of it, a piece of it reaching up to see what was here. It was looking for people," Rachel said, "for prey. It reached out on the anniversary of when it was first awakened, looking for the same meal it got last time." "But there's no town," Martha said, "no patients, no people for it to take. So what happens now?" As if in answer, the seismic monitors on Marcus's phone lit up with alerts. A swarm of small earthquakes, all centered on the pit, all registering the same rhythmic pattern. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. But faster now. Every few seconds instead of every few days. "It's awake," Marcus said, dread settling in his stomach like ice. "Fully awake. And it's hungry." The pit didn't close. For 3 days, Marcus and the Foundation members maintained their watch, hoping the anomaly would resolve itself as Patience had, vanishing at dawn, returning to whatever space between spaces it inhabited. But July 24th came and went, then July 25th, and the pit remained, a 30-foot wound in the prairie that led down to unknowable depths. The seismic activity continued its accelerated rhythm. Every few seconds, a pulse. Every pulse slightly stronger than the last. The temperature around the pit dropped precipitously despite the summer heat. Frost formed on the ground within 50 feet of the edge, and the air itself felt wrong, thick and resistant, like breathing through wet cloth. "We can't stay here indefinitely," Tom said on the morning of July 26th. "People have jobs, families. We need a plan." Marcus knew he was right. They couldn't maintain a permanent human presence at the site, not without drawing attention and questions they couldn't answer.
But leaving it unguarded felt like abandoning a loaded weapon in a schoolyard. "We establish rotating shifts," he decided. 3 people, 8-hour rotations, 24/7 coverage. We keep the sensor network active and add more cameras focused on the pit. Anyone sees anything unusual, they call for backup immediately. "Define unusual," Billy said, looking at the frost-rimmed pit, "because all of this is pretty damn unusual already." "Movement," Marcus clarified. "Anything coming out of the pit or anyone trying to go in. Changes in the pit's size or depth. Anything that suggests the situation is escalating." They implemented the plan that afternoon. Dale Mercer took the first shift, along with his son Jake and Pete Dawson's nephew, a young man named Michael. Marcus made them promise to stay at least 100 feet from the pit's edge and to run, not investigate if anything emerged. Then he drove back to Carver, exhausted and terrified, knowing he'd left a door to hell standing open on the prairie. The news crews started arriving on July 27th. Someone had leaked information, possibly one of the researchers Dr. Martinez had consulted, possibly just someone who'd noticed the unusual seismic activity. Within 24 hours, 3 news vans were parked outside the county building, and Marcus's phone was ringing off the hook. He gave a brief press conference explaining that there had been minor seismic activity on private land, that it was being monitored by qualified professionals, and that there was no danger to the public. The reporters pressed for more details, asked about the October disappearances, suggested there might be a connection. Marcus stonewalled them. There's no connection between routine seismic events and an unrelated missing persons case from last year. The landowners are cooperating fully with safety assessments and will release more information as it becomes available. It was enough to satisfy most of them. But one reporter, a woman named Jennifer Hayes from a Denver station, wasn't buying it. She approached Marcus after the press conference, her cameraman tactfully staying behind. "Sheriff Webb, I've been researching the October 17th disappearances. I've interviewed witnesses, reviewed the social media posts, talked to the families, and now there's seismic activity in the exact same location where people reported seeing a ghost town." She fixed him with sharp, intelligent eyes. "What's really going on out there?" "Exactly what I said in the press conference." "Bullshit." She said it calmly, matter-of-factly. "I'm good at my job, Sheriff, and my job is knowing when I'm being lied to. You're protecting something. The question is whether you're protecting people from information or protecting information from people." Marcus studied her for a moment, making a decision. "Miss Hayes, can we speak off the record?" "Of course. There are things in this world that aren't meant to be public knowledge. Not because of some conspiracy, but because knowing about them doesn't help anyone and could hurt a lot of people. What's happening on that land is being handled. It's contained. And the best thing you and every other reporter can do is walk away and let us handle it. That's not how journalism works." "This isn't about journalism," Marcus said quietly. "This is about survival. Mine, yours, and everyone in this county. I'm asking you, as someone who clearly cares about the truth, to trust that sometimes the truth is dangerous and should stay buried." Jennifer studied him for a long moment. The families of those 10 missing people deserve answers. They deserve their loved ones back. I can't give them that. No one can. But I can keep other families from joining them in grief. He pulled out a business card, writing his personal cell number on the back. "If you insist on investigating this, call me first. Don't go out to that site alone. Don't take your camera crew. Don't be another statistic. Please." She took the card, her expression unreadable. "I'll think about it." That was the best he could hope for. Over the next week, the situation at the pit slowly deteriorated. The frost zone expanded,
reaching nearly 100 feet from the edge. The whispers started again, faint during the day but louder at night, audible from the perimeter. And twice, people on watch reported seeing shadows moving in the pit's depths, too large and wrong-shaped to be natural. Marcus was there for one of those incidents. It was 2 a.m. on August 3rd, and he was on watch with Sarah Chen and Rachel Sullivan. They'd set up chairs and thermoses of coffee, settling in for a long, quiet shift. Then the whispers changed. They became words, still overlapping and distant, but comprehensible. The same phrases repeated over and over in different voices. Let us out. Let us out. Let us out. We're cold. We're cold. We're cold. Please, please, please. Rachel started crying silently. Sarah gripped her flashlight so hard her knuckles went white. Marcus forced himself to stay calm, to not run screaming into the night. It's trying to lure us, he said, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through him. Same thing Patience did. It's making us hear what will break our hearts, what will make us want to help. What if they're real? Rachel whispered. What if those are the people from Patience actually calling for help? Then they've been calling for 136 years, and we still can't save them. Don't listen. Don't engage. Just mark the time and the behavior in the log. The pleading voices continued for 20 minutes before fading back to incomprehensible whispers. Marcus logged it all, knowing the record would mean nothing to anyone who hadn't experienced it, but needing to document everything anyway. When dawn came and their relief arrived, Marcus drove Rachel home personally. She looked shell-shocked, staring out the window with red-rimmed eyes. "My grandmother was right," she said as they pulled up to her house. "This is what we inherit. This horror, this responsibility, for the rest of our lives." "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "It is. And I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's not your fault." She opened the door but paused before getting out. "Sheriff, what happens if we fail? If the pit keeps growing? If the long dark gets strong enough to break free completely?" Marcus had been asking himself the same question. "I don't know, but we're not going to fail. We're going to hold the line, same as our ancestors did." He wished he believed that. On August 10th, Dr. Martinez called again. Marcus almost didn't answer, but professional courtesy won out. "Sheriff Webb, I need to talk to you about the seismic data." "Dr. Martinez, we've been over this." "Just listen, please. The pattern has changed. For months, it was regular pulses every few days. Now it's continuous and it's strengthening. Whatever is down there, it's building towards something, some kind of event." Marcus's blood ran cold. "What kind of event?" "I don't know. I've never seen readings like this. But Sheriff, the energy being released is enormous. If this is leading to an eruption or a collapse or..." She paused. "Sheriff, have you considered evacuating the area? Because if my calculations are right, we're looking at a potential catastrophic incident within the next few weeks." "Thank you for the warning, Dr. Martinez. I'll take it under advisement." "Sheriff, please, let me bring a team in. Let us at least assess the danger properly." "I can't allow that. I'm sorry." He hung up, then immediately called an emergency meeting of the Foundation Board. They assembled that evening at the church community room, all 23 members present despite the short notice. Marcus laid out Dr. Martinez's warning. She's predicting some kind of catastrophic event, soon, possibly within weeks. "The next anniversary," Eleanor said immediately. She'd brought her research, spreading papers across the table. "Look at the timeline. July 23rd, they opened the chamber. October 17th, Patience disappeared. That's 86 days. And July 23rd this year, the pit opened. 86 days from now is..." She counted on her fingers. October 17, 2025. The same date Patience disappeared in 1889. The same date it appeared last year. So what happens on October 17th this time? Dale asked. Another appearance? Or something worse? The cycle is broken, Marcus said. The pit didn't close. The long dark is awake outside its normal schedule. We're in uncharted territory. Martha Sullivan leaned forward, her elderly face grave. In the old stories my grandmother told me, there was something else, a detail I thought was just embellishment. She said that when a hungry place wakes fully, when it gathers enough strength, it doesn't just take what comes to it. It reaches out. It hunts. What does that mean? Michael Dawson asked. It means, Marcus said slowly, understanding dawning with horrible clarity, that we might not be able to just guard the pit. If the long dark is strong enough, it might be able to reach beyond the site, into town, into homes. The room erupted in frightened voices. Marcus held up his hand for quiet. We don't know that for certain, but we need to prepare for the possibility. Which means we have 2 months to figure out how to stop this, or at least contain it. How do we fight something we don't understand? Jake Mercer asked. We learn, Marcus said. We research every legend, every story, every historical account of similar phenomena. We find out if anyone, anywhere, has ever successfully defeated something like the long dark. And if they haven't, he paused, then we figure it out ourselves. The next 8 weeks were a blur of frantic activity. The Foundation members scattered across the country, visiting libraries and archives, consulting with experts in folklore, mythology, and paranormal phenomena. They couldn't reveal the full truth, but they could ask hypothetical questions, gather information that might prove useful. Eleanor Ashford became their central researcher, coordinating the information flow and looking for patterns. She worked 16-hour days, her dining room table buried under printouts and photocopies and scanned documents from a dozen different sources. Marcus, meanwhile, maintained the watch rotation and dealt with the increasing strangeness at the pit site. The frost zone continued expanding. By late August, it reached 100 feet from the edge, and ice crystals formed in the air itself, creating a permanent fog that hung over the site like a shroud. The whispers grew louder and more articulate, and twice things tried to climb out of the pit. The first time was August 19th. Tom was on watch when his radio crackled with panic. "Marcus, get out here now! Something's coming up!" Marcus and Billy were there in 12 minutes, racing across the prairie at dangerous speeds. They arrived to find Tom and his 2 companions standing behind their vehicles, weapons drawn, staring at the pit. Something was halfway out. It looked almost human. Arms, legs, a torso. But it was made of that same living shadow Marcus had seen before, constantly shifting and reforming. It pulled itself up with horrible determination, its movements jerky and wrong. "What do we do?" Billy asked, his voice high with fear. Marcus remembered Catherine's words about iron. He grabbed a tire iron from his truck and advanced toward the thing, stopping at the edge of the frost zone. "Get back in the pit," he ordered, feeling ridiculous even as he said it. The shadow thing oriented on him. It had no face, no features, but Marcus felt it looking at him, evaluating him, hungry. He threw the tire iron. It hit the shadow thing in what would have been its chest, and the reaction was immediate and violent. The shadow shrieked, a sound like metal tearing, and recoiled. Smoke poured from where the iron had struck, and the thing began to dissolve, losing cohesion. Within seconds, it had retreated fully into the pit, and the whispers rose to a cacophony of rage and pain before fading to silence. "Ironworks," Marcus said, his hands shaking, "at least on whatever that was. They reinforced the watch posts with iron tools, crowbars, railroad spikes, even iron fence posts. When the second shadow thing tried to emerge on September 3rd, Sarah was ready. She'd fashioned a crude spear from a length of rebar, and she drove it into the shadow's mass before it was fully emerged. It retreated immediately, screaming. But each attempt was stronger than the last. Whatever the long dark was, it was learning, adapting, building strength. Eleanor's research finally yielded results in mid-September. She called Marcus at 11 p.m., too excited to wait for morning. "I found something. Multiple somethings. Marcus, this isn't unique to patients."
Throughout history, there are accounts of similar phenomena, places where the boundary between our world and somewhere else grew thin. And there's a pattern to how they were handled. How? Binding. Not destroying, but binding. The boundary can't be closed permanently, but it can be reinforced, strengthened. Think of it like scar tissue forming over a wound. How do you create scar tissue on reality? Rituals, sacrifices, permanent markers that anchor the boundary in place. Eleanor's voice was excited but strained. In Ireland, they built stone circles around thin places. In Japan, they used sacred ropes and torii gates. The Native Americans had medicine wheels and sacred grounds. Different cultures, different methods, but the same principle. Anchor the boundary with physical markers. Reinforce it with symbolic action, and the thing on the other side can't break through. What kind of symbolic action? That's where it gets difficult.
Most accounts mention blood sacrifice, animals, sometimes humans. Offerings made willingly to strengthen the seal. But there might be alternatives. I'm still researching. Marcus thought about the 43 souls of patients, sacrificed unwillingly and trapped forever. The idea of more sacrifice, even voluntary, made him sick. Keep looking for alternatives. We're not killing anyone to fix this. Understood. But Marcus, we're running out of time. October 17th is 28 days away. He knew. Over the next 3 weeks, they made preparations based on Eleanor's research. Dale Mercer sourced iron stakes, each one 6 feet long, and blessed by Father Mike from the Catholic Church in Casper, who'd agreed to do it without asking questions, sensing this was important. They arranged the stakes in a circle around the pit, 144 of them exactly, one for every year since patients disappeared. Rachel Sullivan worked with her university's anthropology department, again, without revealing too much, to research Native American practices for sanctifying ground. She learned about tobacco offerings, sage burning, and the importance of intention and respect in sacred ceremonies. Tom, despite being retired, coordinated with law enforcement across the state, arranging for the area to be closed on October 17th under the guise of a hazmat training exercise. Roads would be blocked, airspace restricted, media kept at a distance. And Marcus prepared himself mentally for what might be the most important night of his life, the night they would either seal the long dark back into its prison or lose everything. October 17th, 2025 arrived cold and clear. Marcus stood at the command post they'd established at the perimeter, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Around him, the Foundation members gathered, all 23, plus Tom, Sarah, and Billy. They'd all insisted on being there, whatever the risk. At 6 p.m., as the last light faded from the sky, the pit began to change. The darkness within it deepened, became more absolute. The whispers rose to a roar of voices, thousands strong, crying out in hunger and rage and desperate longing. The frost zone expanded rapidly, rushing outward like a wave, covering everything within 200 feet of the pit in ice. And then patients began to appear. Not fully, not all at once, but in fragments. A building would materialize for a few seconds, solid and real, before fading to transparency. A street would appear, people walking along it, before dissolving into mist. It was as if two realities were trying to occupy the same space, fighting for dominance.
It's trying to manifest, Eleanor said, watching through binoculars. The long dark is trying to bring Patience back, but something's preventing it from fully crossing over. The pit, Marcus realized. When Patience was whole, it was the doorway. But now the pit is exposed, raw. The long dark can't create the illusion of normalcy anymore. It's been wounded, which makes it more dangerous, Dale said. A wounded animal fights harder. As if to prove his point, shadow things began pouring from the pit. Not one or two, but dozens, then hundreds. They formed a black tide, flowing outward across the frost zone, searching for prey. "Iron!" Marcus shouted. "Everyone to your positions!" The Foundation members had practiced this. They moved to the circle of iron stakes, each person taking responsibility for a section. When the shadow things reached the iron barrier, they recoiled, shrieking. But there were so many of them, and they were testing the circle, looking for weaknesses. One found a gap where two stakes were slightly too far apart. It squeezed through, its mass compressing to fit the space. Michael Dawson was closest. He grabbed a railroad spike and drove it into the shadow's center. It exploded into smoke, but two more were already pushing through the same gap. "Close the gaps," Tom yelled. "More stakes, now!" They'd brought extras for exactly this reason. Sarah and Billy ran to reinforce the weak points, hammering additional stakes into the frozen ground. But for every gap they closed, the shadows found another. A shadow thing broke through near Marcus's position. It lunged at him, and he swung his iron crowbar, connecting with its mass. The shadow dispersed, but another was already taking its place. And another. They were relentless, mindless, driven by the hunger of the thing that spawned them. "We can't hold this all night," Jake Mercer shouted, driving back two shadows with an iron fence post. He was right.
They were already exhausted, and this had been going on for less than an hour. They needed something more permanent, more powerful. Marcus made a decision. "Eleanor, the ritual, we need to do it now." Eleanor had prepared for this possibility. She pulled out a canvas bag containing tobacco, sage, and other sacred materials she'd gathered. "We need an offering, something given willingly." "What kind of offering?" "Blood works best. Life force transferred intentionally to strengthen the boundary." Marcus didn't hesitate. He pulled out his pocket knife and made a cut across his palm, deep enough to bleed freely. "Will mind work?" "You're descended from the founders. Your blood has a connection to this place. Yes, it'll work." He moved to the center of the circle, the chaos of the battle raging around him. The shadows couldn't cross the iron barrier completely, but they pressed against it, creating a writhing wall of darkness that surrounded the defenders. Marcus held his bleeding hand over the pit's edge, letting blood drop into the darkness. "I offer this willingly," he said, the words feeling both absurd and sacred. "To bind what should be bound, to seal what should be sealed, to protect those who cannot protect themselves." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the blood drops began to glow, a soft golden light that spread from each point where they touched the pit's interior. The light formed lines, then patterns, creating a web of luminescence that stretched across the pit like a net. The shadow things shrieked and withdrew, retreating toward the pit. The whispers rose to a deafening crescendo, and the fragmented images of Patience solidified fully. For just a moment, the ghost town stood complete and real on the prairie. Every building perfect, every light burning bright. Marcus saw Catherine Mercer standing in the street, looking directly at him. She smiled sadly and mouthed two words, "Thank you." Then Patience vanished. The shadow things dissolved. The whispers cut off mid-cry, and the pit began to close, the earth flowing like liquid to fill the void, sealing the wound in reality. Within 5 minutes, it was done. The pit was gone, replaced by normal prairie soil. The frost melted rapidly,
water pooling on the ground. The oppressive wrongness in the air lifted, and Marcus could suddenly breathe fully for the first time in months. He collapsed to his knees, exhausted and shaking. Around him, the Foundation members were in similar states, sitting, lying down, crying with relief. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd sealed the long dark back into its prison. Tom helped Marcus to his feet. Is it over? Marcus looked at the place where the pit had been, now just dark soil. For now. Maybe for another 136 years. Maybe longer. He wrapped his bleeding hand in a bandana. But it'll be back. These things always come back.
Then we'll be ready, Rachel said, helping her grandmother stand. Our families will be ready. We'll pass on what we learned, prepare the next generation. And hope they never need it, Martha added. They packed up the equipment slowly, everyone moving with the careful deliberation of people who'd survived something that should have killed them. The iron stakes they left in place, a permanent barrier just in case. They'd become a local mystery over the years, Marcus supposed. Another strange Wyoming landmark with a weird story attached. By dawn, they were back in Carver, exhausted but alive. The roadblocks came down, the hazmat exercise officially ended, and life slowly returned to normal. Jennifer Hayes, the reporter, called him a week later. Sheriff Webb, I wanted you to know I'm not running the story. Why not? Because I went out there. On October 18th, after everything was done, I saw the iron stakes arranged in that perfect circle.
I felt something. Something that told me you were right. Some truths are dangerous. This is one of them. She paused. But I'm keeping my notes. If you ever need someone to tell this story, if it becomes necessary to warn people, you have my number. Thank you, Miss Hayes. Just doing my job, Sheriff, which apparently includes knowing when not to do my job. Life went on. November came, then December. The seismic monitors showed no activity. The temperature at the site returned to normal. The whispers didn't return. Marcus continued his duties as sheriff, attending to the normal rhythm of county life. But he kept one eye always on the monitors, one ear always listening for the first sign of trouble. On Christmas Eve, he drove out to the site alone, parking at the perimeter as snow began to fall. The iron stakes formed a dark circle against the white prairie, and in the center, where the pit had been, the ground was still bare and dark. He walked to the edge of the circle, not crossing it, never crossing it, and stood in the falling snow, thinking about his father, his great-great-grandfather, and all the people who'd carried this burden before him. I held the line, he said to the wind and the snow and the sleeping horror beneath the ground. I did my duty, just like you asked. There was no answer, of course, just the wind and the soft hiss of falling snow. But as Marcus walked back to his truck, he could have sworn he heard, faint and distant, a woman's voice carried on the wind. We know, and we're grateful. He drove back to Carver, back to the warm lights and Christmas decorations, back to the world of the living. Behind him, the prairie was silent and still, keeping its secrets. For now. On a cold March morning in 2161, Sheriff Elena Webb stood at the same perimeter her great-great-great-great-great-grandfather Marcus had defended 136 years earlier. She was 32 years old, newly elected, and scared out of her mind. The iron stakes were still there, weathered but intact, maintained by generations of Foundation members who'd kept the faith and passed on the knowledge. The ground inside the circle was different from the surrounding prairie, darker, harder, like scar tissue on the earth. Her second in command, a descendant of Dale Mercer named Cole, stood beside her. The sensors are going crazy. It's starting. Elena checked her equipment.
Modern versions of what Marcus had used, more sophisticated but serving the same purpose. The seismic reading showed that familiar rhythmic pulse, inhale, exhale, the long dark waking from its century-long sleep. "Everyone ready?" she called to her team, 20 descendants of the founding families, all trained for this moment, all carrying the inherited burden of their ancestors' mistakes. "Ready," came the chorused reply.
As the sun set and October 17, 2061 began its long night, patience started to appear. The buildings materialized slowly, growing solid and real, lights burning in windows, smoke rising from chimneys. And in the main street, barely visible in the gathering darkness, Elena saw a woman in an old-fashioned dress, standing exactly where Catherine Mercer had stood for almost 3 centuries. The woman looked at Elena, smiled sadly, and raised one hand in greeting. Elena raised her hand in return. "We're here," she called across the distance. "We're still here. We won't let you be forgotten." The night had begun, and the watch continued, as it always had, as it always would, until the long dark finally slept forever, or the world ended, whichever came first.